Hello, I'm Jeremy, and welcome to another episode of Jeremy's Reviews, where mistreated movies get a second chance. Aside from watching JonTron's video on Barbie games and watching Bob Show's Barbie movie review marathon, I have no experience with Barbie whatsoever, which to be fair, you could probably tell given how I'm a dude. But despite that, I was very excited for the live-action Barbie movie. When I first heard about the film, I thought it was a made-up meme movie like Goncharov. But after seeing the teaser, I was like, oh my god, this is actually real. And my excitement continued to grow after the official trailer came out and made it look like an insane, bizarre, candy-coated meta fever dream. Admittedly, the information I found out from MJ Tanner's Why I'm Worried About the Barbie Movie video did cause some suspicion, but nonetheless, I was still hyped. And after all the hype and all the discourse, I finally saw the live-action Barbie movie. So what are my thoughts? I friggin' love it! Now, before I address the actual movie, let me discuss the elephant in the room. The feminist aspects. There has been so much friggin' discourse about Barbie's feminist message. You got one side saying that the movie is misandrist and anti-man, and then you have another side saying, no, it's not anti-man, you're just sexist. It was frankly exhausting to follow that discourse, let me tell you. Anyways, is the movie actually anti-man and misandrist? No, not really. Now, there are some moments that sort of fall into that territory. Some of the moments of Barbie and Ken first being in the real world are very unrealistic, like those construction workers acting like cartoon characters from the 1950s, and it does get a little too preachy near the end, especially with the female cognitive dissonance being the thing that unbrainwashes the Barbies, because screw subtlety, let's just bash the message into the audience's brain. But aside from that, Barbie's actually pretty effective in terms of its feminist message. Rather than paint all men as evil, the film essentially analyzes how good people can be manipulated to do bad things based on their own understandable desires. Showing how people like Ken can be manipulated by things like horses, mini fridges, and the patriarchy, which can easily be interpreted as metaphors for manosphere losers like Andrew Tate, and be misled into thinking the way to earn the things they want is to be a sexist D-bag who treats women like objects. Unlike something like She-Hulk or Charlie's Angels 2019, which just go, men are awful because they're men, except for a few token examples that we can either use to our benefit or just simply there so we can say, see, we don't hate all men. Barbie firmly takes a stand against toxic masculinity and how that can manipulate good people into doing bad things. And I feel like a lot of the people who critique the film as man-hating completely miss that nuance and just focus on some of the film's cringier feminist elements. Even the otherwise talented Critical Drinker is guilty of this. As well, his review of Barbie did bring up a few good points, like how the idea that Barbies are molded by real-world actions means that there could be several Barbies that are dismembered and burned. It was overall a very messy and bizarre review that missed a ton of the nuances of Barbie's attempts at feminism and made me question whether we even watched the same movie. So yeah, Barbie definitely has some bumpy roads when executing its feminist message, but overall it did a relatively decent job, and doesn't earn the man-hating moniker it got from so many people. So now that that's out of the way, let's talk about the actual movie. Starting off with the set design and costumes, holy cow is it breathtaking. Barbie Land is honestly one of the most visually striking locations I've ever seen in a film. Each location inside Barbie Land manages to perfectly capture the plasticity and colorfulness of a Barbie playhouse, yet they still feel like real locations you could live in. And the colors aren't so garish as to either look ugly or hurt your eyes. As for the costumes that each member of Barbie Land wears also manages to make them look like Barbies and Kens and add to the overall uniqueness of the film. It's really cool design that makes this movie come alive. Also, there was one shot in the Mattel office that looked really cool. There's a scene where two people in separate cubicles are talking to each other, and the split screen in that scene was so cool and visually striking. Just watch the movie and you'll see what I mean. But Barbie is more than just a pretty face, as it has some fantastic characters as well. Starting off with stereotypical Barbie, she's a really solid main character. For starters, Margot Robbie is fantastic in the role. Not just because she's very pretty, but because she also manages to capture the emotions, mannerisms, and desires of the character. Robbie perfectly captures the intentional vapidness of SB without going into obnoxious Valley Girl territory. Her comedic timing is pretty solid, and she has enough emotion to ground the character, but not come off as sappy or hackneyed. On top of that, her arc is very interesting. Stereotypical Barbie starts off as just that, a stereotypical Barbie. She's everything you think of when you think of Barbie, which the character herself even acknowledges. But for reasons unknown to her, she begins to feel strange, having thoughts of death, gaining cellulite, and feeling very unlike herself. She then finds out from Weird Barbie that she needs to go to the real world to fix it, so both she and Ken, who ended up stowing away, end up going into the real world. But while Ken is off doing his own thing, Barbie realizes that the world isn't anything like Barbie Land. That not only are women unfairly treated simply due to them being women, but her mere existence was one of the contributing factors for that. And then, over the course of the movie, she begins to really understand what it means to be empowering for women and desire her own identity. It's a really well-made arc that takes a character that would ordinarily be a one-dimensional joke and make her have way more depth than she would otherwise. Overall, stereotypical Barbie is a really solid character. Not only does Margot Robbie do a fantastic job in the role, but the character herself is very interesting, a solid anchor for the story, and overall just a very fascinating and interesting character. Next, we have stereotypical Ken, who is also awesome. For starters, like Robbie, Ryan Gosling is absolutely fantastic in the role. When I saw that Gosling was going to be in this film, I was really excited, given how much I liked him in another awesome, albeit tonally different comedy, The Nice Guys. And like in that film, Ryan is fantastic. His comedic timing is absolutely impeccable, giving Ken some genuinely funny moments and lines, but at the same time, his performance has enough genuineness that you can feel sympathy for Ken. It's a fantastic performance that really shows that Gosling needs to be in more comedies. On top of that, Ken's arc is absolutely fascinating. Ken starts out solely desiring Barbie's affection, even though Barbie doesn't see him as anything more than a friend. But despite that, Ken never really comes off as an incel or a nice guy, just a simple soul that desires love. This desire takes a toll at Ken's inside until he ends up stowing away inside Barbie's car due to a bet he made with the other Kens. Once he gets to the real world, Ken discovers that men are more powerful in the real world than in Barbie Land and gets swept up in the patriarchy. Like I alluded to earlier, I think that the patriarchy, horses, mini fridges, and whatnot are a metaphor for people like Andrew Tate. Now, if you want a full, in-depth explanation of this kind of thing, Tommy NFG has an absolutely fantastic video on it that I left a link to in the description. But the short version is that these types essentially sucker decent people who are having trouble with their life into believing that their crazy, fear-mongering, brain-rotting takes are incredibly rational, and that believing in their BS and giving them money will help the customers get a better life, and of course, have more luck with women. And this is exactly the kind of thing Ken gets suckered into the course of his journey. Unlike Hal from Megamind, where he was always a scumbag, and getting superpowers just magnified his negative attributes and turned him into a full-on supervillain, the patriarchy, horses, mini fridges, Godfather, and everything else clouded Ken's brain and made him think that the way to get the things he wanted was to do all of these bad things. Ken does become an antagonist, but he never really becomes a villain. He's just obsessed with finding an identity and is using these human things to find that identity. Ken even mentions that he lost interest in the patriarchy once he found out that it had nothing to do with horses, which on the surface just seems like just a funny line. But if you look deeper, it shows that evil often doesn't come from people who just hate to hate. It sometimes comes from ordinarily good individuals who are manipulated into thinking wrong things are right, and the evil things people do to achieve desires are actually right. Despite being suckered in by all of that stuff, Ken never really cared about any of it, and only really wanted self-fulfillment. This is another thing that people complaining about the movie being anti-man completely miss. The film isn't saying Ken is bad for wanting identity and self-fulfillment, rather quite the opposite. What the film is saying is bad is the methods Ken and others like him use to get that identity and self-fulfillment. That it offers you the answer but just leaves you feeling empty. Replacing the answer with a bunch of, vague things that make you think that you're at a good point in life. And at the end, Ken realizes that and goes on to form his own identity. Overall, Ken is just a fascinating character. Not only is Ryan Gosling fantastic in the role, but his arc is filled with so much commentary and nuance that strengthens the character even more. Awesome stuff. And the other characters are great as well. The other Kens and Barbies are pretty funny, with each actor doing their best to make their Ken. Alan is easily the best character, as his running gag of nobody caring about him is hilarious, and Michael Cera perfectly captures the awkwardness of the character. Weird Barbie is an enjoyably eccentric character whose personality perfectly contrasts with stereotypical Barbie and is given a great performance from Kate McKinnon. Also, I did not know that she did the splits using a fake leg. I genuinely thought that was a real leg. While Gloria and Sasha aren't particularly amazing or memorable, and Sasha can be kind of annoying in places, they are both decent anchors for the story and interact with the other characters well. And Will Ferrell is great as the CEO of Mattel, really giving the character his natural charisma. All in all, a solid cast of characters. Moving on to the humor, and it's really well made. The humor of Barbie reminds me a lot of the Rocky and Bullwinkle movie from 2000. Because while Barbie's comedy is nowhere near as over the top as R&B, you won't find any jokes like this.
It's almost as if there were a mole in the White House. That's just ridiculous.
There are certain parallels in how both films approach their comedy. In addition to both films revolving around the title character going into the real world, they both have a similar tongue-in-cheek tone, they both lovingly poke fun at and pay homage to their respective franchises, they both have an ongoing narrator that they do some funny things with, and when Barbie's clothes get thrown out, there's like cartoony text boxes illustrating the different clothes, which add to the movie's cartoony feel and kind of reminds me of the Rocky and Bullwinkle movie. It's a really unique kind of humor that takes the humor from a previous awesome movie and puts its own unique spin on it. And on top of that, there are some other clever bits of humor as well. There are some genuinely funny lines, clever references to previous Barbies and Kens, which some of them I was shocked to find out were actual things, funny nods to gender stereotypes, and many more funny things. While far from the funniest comedy I've ever seen, Barbie does have a pretty solid sense of humor, and enough unique energy to make it stand on its own 2 feet as a pretty successful comedy. Great stuff. Also, as much as I love the nods to all the obscure Barbies, not putting in a reference to Oreo Barbie or roller skating Barbie were complete missed opportunities, in my opinion. Finally, we have the soundtrack. Now, I'm not going to go full in depth on every song, as I plan on reviewing the Barbie album in an Album Quickies video on my music channel, so I'll just comment on the song's placements in the movie. They're great. While some songs like Dominic Fike's Hey Blondie and Khalid's Silver Platter are basically just background noise, there's a ton of other fantastic ways the Barbie soundtrack ties into the movie. Lizzo's Pink is a perfect track to help open the movie, with its bubbly production and Lizzo's smooth voice serving as a great introduction to the colorful world of Barbie Land. And the Bad Day version that appears later in the movie is very funny. Charlie XCX's Speed Drive makes for pretty good chase music. Sam Smith's Man I Am serves as a good musical introduction to this new Ken Land. And easily the best implementation of the soundtrack is Billie Eilish's What Was I Made For in the film's climax. On its own, What Was I Made For is an absolutely beautiful track that rivals Everything I Wanted for the title of my favorite Billie Eilish song, but seeing it in the climax with all the images Barbie is seeing, my god, it just hits. Massive props to Billy and Phineas for going so hard and making an incredible song that makes a great scene hit even harder. An absolutely fantastic soundtrack for a great movie. Oh yeah, I'm Just Ken is also a thing. Okay, in all seriousness, I'm completely mixed on I'm Just Ken. On the one hand, the lyrics are fantastic, and it's integrated in the movie pretty well, but at the same time, the production and vocals, while not awful, leave a lot to be desired. It lacks the elegance of something like Spaceman by Sam Ryder, and it feels like it's trying way too hard to be this movie's Peaches, which doesn't make the song have a clear identity. So overall, I get what I'm Just Ken is trying to do, and I can definitely respect it for that, but I just don't think it works as a song on its own. Not bad, but just not for me. In conclusion, Barbie is an absolutely fantastic film. The sets and costumes are phenomenal, the characters are solid, the acting is fantastic, the humor is very funny, and while its feminist messaging is definitely rocky, it overall succeeds at what it's trying to do. It's honestly refreshing to see a film like Barbie that actually understands what feminism is and doesn't just endlessly bash on men and claim that's equality. And to see such a film do so well at the box office and met with so much praise, in addition to being an actual honest-to-God comedy film, is honestly fantastic. I know there are a lot of people that hate this movie for a wide variety of reasons, and while I respect their opinions for the most part, I have to disagree. Is Barbie perfect? No. But it's an incredibly fun, unique, interesting, and really enjoyable comedy from a franchise I never expected would make something I like. And while previously the idea of a Mattel cinematic universe would have made me respond with, what the actual hell? If these projects have the same passion, care, and creativity that Barbie had, I don't know, they might be worth my while. Especially the Uno movie. Seriously, a heist comedy starring Lil Yachty, I am sold. But until that, we'll just have to see if that comes into fruition. Until then, we have this fun, solid little comedy that I 100% endorse and recommend for you to check out. And for those wondering if I'll be making an Oppenheimer review to go with this one because of the whole Barbenheimer thing, probably not. At the time of this video, I haven't seen Oppenheimer, and while it doesn't look terrible, it's not exactly a movie that's high on my list, and I don't want to see a movie just to see it, you know? Anyways, comment your thoughts on Barbie, any great movies you saw this year, what your favorite Greta Gerwig movie is, because, this is my first Greta Gerwig movie, and I want to see if, she made any other films I might like. And be sure to stay tuned for whatever I make next. Till then, this is Jeremy, ending our broadcast day. Bye.